Welcome to Vivid Verses. If our words resonate with you, please subscribe, tap the like, and share your thoughts and your feelings in the comments. Now let's begin. The scent of expensive lilies always preceded Elena into a room. It was a heavy, cloying fragrance that clung to the curtains and lingered in the hallways of our colonial-style home in the hills of North Arlington. I was in the study, hunched over the blueprints for the St. Jude's Library restoration project. The ink on the vellum was crisp, a network of white lines on a blue field that made sense in a way my domestic life currently did not. The library was an 1890s build, stubborn, grand, and riddled with hidden rot behind the mahogany wainscoting. It required a delicate touch. You couldn't just rip out the rot. You had to reinforce the structure from within before the exterior noticed it was being changed. The door creaked open. Elena didn't knock. She was wearing a silk robe the color of a bruised plum, the fabric catching the low light of my desk lamp. "You're still working, Elias?" she asked. Her voice was a practice purr, the kind she used when she wanted a specific outcome. "The structural load on the west wing is off by 2%, I said, not looking up. "If I don't find where the previous architect fudged the numbers, the whole reading room will sag in a decade." She walked behind me, her hands sliding onto my shoulders. Her fingers were cold, despite the warmth of the house. She began to knead the muscles at the base of my neck. "You work too hard. You should come to bed. I bought something new today, from that boutique Sloan told me about." I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, not of desire, but of a quiet, weary recognition. For the past 6 months, intimacy had become a currency. It wasn't about connection. It was a prelude to a request, a softening of the target. "Sloan has interesting taste," I remarked, circling a faulty joist on the map with a red pencil. "She says a woman should always keep her husband." "Inspired," Elena whispered, her lips brushing my ear. "And she says a husband who is inspired is more likely to be generous." There it was, the tell. Elena wasn't a natural gambler. She always showed her hand before the betting began. I'd known Elena for 12 years, married for 8. She used to be a woman who loved the outdoors and spoke with a sharp, honest wit. But over the last year, she'd been spending more time with Sloan and Bridget, women who viewed marriage as a corporate merger where the goal was to liquidate the partner's assets. "Generosity is a virtue," I said, finally turning in my chair. She smiled, a slow, calculated expression. She looked beautiful, certainly. She'd spent a fortune at the med spa recently, her skin pulled tight and glowing. But her eyes were busy, darting to the corner of my desk where my personal laptop sat, the one with the encrypted drive. "I saw that townhouse on 4th Street, she said, her voice dropping an octave. "The one with the garden. I was thinking it would be such a wonderful investment for me. In my name. Just a little something for my future peace of mind." She leaned in, her robe slipping just enough to be a deliberate distraction. "We'll talk about it in the morning, Elena," I said, standing up. I kissed her forehead, a chaste, brotherly gesture that I knew would irritate her. "I need to finish these load-bearing calculations. If I get them wrong, people could get hurt." The mask slipped for a fraction of a second. Her jaw tightened, a hard line appearing in her neck. "Fine. Don't stay up too late." She turned and floated out, the lilies trailing behind her like a funeral procession. I sat back down and didn't look at the blueprints. Instead, I pulled a small black ledger from a locked drawer. I wasn't just an architect of buildings. I was an architect of systems. And I had noticed the rot in my own foundation months ago. The next afternoon, the office was a chaotic symphony of clicking keyboards and the hum of the large-scale plotter. My business partner, Marcus, was currently red-faced, arguing with a zoning officer on speakerphone. "I don't care if the tree is a historic white oak herald," Marcus bellowed, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. "The root system is undermining the sidewalk and the sewage line. It's not history. It's a plumbing catastrophe waiting to happen." Marcus was a man of immense passions and very little patience. He lived in a state of perpetual combat with the city, which made him a brilliant partner for the legal side of our firm. Toby, our junior associate, tripped over a stack of foam core boards near my desk. Toby was 24, possessed the grace of a newborn giraffe, and had a heart of pure gold. Sorry, Elias. I was looking at the renderings for the library's stained glass. Toby stammered, adjusting his thick glasses. Did you know the original glassmaker was a hermit who lived in a cave? He used local minerals to get that specific shade of amber. It's fascinating, really. Also, I think I spilled a bit of my latte on the break room rug. Should I call a professional? Or just use salt? Salt, Toby. And blot. Don't rub, I said, smiling despite myself. Right. Blot. Like a secret agent. Got it. Toby vanished toward the kitchen, nearly colliding with a filing cabinet on the way. Marcus hung up the phone with a crash and slumped into the chair across from my desk. I hate this city. Everyone wants a beautiful building, but no one wants to move a single blade of grass to build it. He looked at me, his sharp eyes softening. You look like hell, Elias. Elena's still pushing the townhouse thing. Among other things, I said. She was at the club yesterday with Sloan. Marcus said, picking up a brass paperweight and tossing it from hand to hand. My wife, Sarah, was at the next table. She said Sloan was giving Elena a lecture on postmarital security, using words like alimony ready and equitable distribution. Sarah said it sounded like they were planning a heist, not a brunch. Sloan is a parasite, I said quietly. She's been divorced 3 times, and her only hobby is ensuring her friends end up as miserable as she is. And Elena's listening. She thinks she's being clever, I said. She thinks she can use certain domestic advantages to get me to sign over the deed to the rental properties or move the liquid assets into a joint trust she can access. She's been very affectionate lately. Marcus winced. That's cold. What are you going to do? I'm going to let her play the game, I said. I've already moved the primary investment accounts into a revocable trust established before the marriage. Our prenup is ironclad, but she thinks because she's been a supportive wife for 8 years, she can challenge it based on lifestyle expectations. Can she? Not if she's the one who violates the good faith clauses, I said. I've been documenting the transactional nature of our interactions, and I've hired Julian. Marcus whistled. Julian was the most terrifying forensic accountant / divorce attorney in the tri-state area. He didn't just win cases, he erased the opposition. You're going nuclear? Marcus asked. No, I said, looking at the blueprint of the library. I'm just ensuring the structure doesn't collapse on me when the rot finally gives way. The following Friday, we hosted a dinner party. It was Elena's idea, a gathering of friends that was actually a theater for her and Sloan to observe my softening. The dining room was lit by flickering beeswax candles. Elena had outdone herself. Roasted duck with a cherry reduction, fingerling potatoes, and a vintage Bordeaux that cost more than my first car. Sloan sat to my right, dripping in gold chains that rattled like a Marley's ghost every time she moved. Her husband of the moment, a quiet, defeated-looking man named Arthur who sold medical supplies, stared into his wine glass as if hoping to drown in it. Elias, Sloan said, her voice like sandpaper on silk. Elena tells me the firm is doing exceptionally well. That library contract, it must be worth a fortune. It's a significant project, I said, cutting a piece of duck. But restorations are expensive. High overhead, low margins. It's more of a legacy project than a cash cow. Elena laughed, a light, tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, he's so modest. He's always protecting the nest egg. But I told him, what's the point of a nest egg if the birds don't get to fly? She reached under the table and rested her hand on my thigh, her thumb tracing circles. It was a bold move, right in front of guests. She was signaling to Sloan. See, I have him exactly where I want him. I've been looking at that townhouse again, Elias. Elena continued, her hand squeezing slightly. Sloan thinks it would be a perfect anniversary gift for me. Since 8 years is, what is it, Sloan? The year of the great shift, Sloan said, showing her unnaturally white teeth. A time for a husband to show he values his wife's sacrifice. I looked at Sloan, then at Elena. I saw the calculation, the smugness, and the absolute lack of genuine affection. They thought I was a mark. They thought because I was quiet and patient, I was blind. Actually, I said, taking a slow sip of wine, I was thinking about the finances today. I've decided to make a major move. Elena's hand stilled. Her eyes brightened. Oh, I'm putting a significant portion of our liquid capital into a blind trust for charitable endowment, I said. The St. Jude's Literacy Program. It'll be a tax write-off for the firm, and it'll ensure the library has funding for the next 50 years. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crack the mahogany table. Elena's hand withdrew from my leg as if I'd turned into a hot stove. Charity, Sloane sneered. Elias, surely you're joking. You have to think of your family first. I'm thinking of the family name, I said calmly. Philanthropy is the highest form of legacy. Don't you agree, Arthur? The medical supply salesman jumped, startled to be included in the conversation. My mother always said a penny saved is a penny earned. But she was a bit of a miser. Died with $60,000 stuffed in her mattress. The cats ate half of it before we found her. Toby, who had been invited because Elena thought he was harmless, let out a sudden, bark-like laugh. The cats? That's brilliant. Did they get sick? I mean, obviously that's sad. But the fiber intake must have been incredible. The tension broke, but not in the way Elena wanted. She spent the rest of the night in a cold, brittle silence, while Sloane shot her looks of pure exasperation. 2 weeks later, the foolishness truly began. I was working late at the office when my phone buzzed with an alert from our home security system. Elena had entered my private study. The camera, a discreet unit hidden in the molding of the bookshelf, showed her searching through my drawers. She wasn't looking for jewelry. She was looking for the passwords to the offshore accounts Sloane had convinced her I was hiding. The irony was that there were no offshore accounts. I was a man of the law. I paid my taxes, I kept my books clean, and I protected my assets through legitimate legal instruments. But Sloane's terrible advice had convinced Elena that every successful man has a secret pile of gold, and all a smart wife had to do was find it to use as leverage during a divorce. On the screen, I watched Elena find a folder I'd left specifically for her find. It was labeled Project Phoenix, Financial Reallocation. Inside were documents that looked like I was prepping to move millions of dollars out of the country. In reality, they were dummy drafts for a theoretical restructuring of the firm's debt. Nothing to do with our personal wealth, but filled with enough jargon to look suspicious to a layperson. She snapped photos of every page with her phone. Her hands were shaking. She looked terrified but also thrilled. She thought she had the smoking gun. She thought she could prove financial abandonment or fraudulent concealment. I turned off the monitor and leaned back in my chair. Is everything okay? Toby asked, poking his head into my office. He was wearing a cycling helmet and looked like a very lost astronaut. I'm heading out. Marcus said to tell you the zoning board approved the library's west wing, but only if we use heritage-certified mortar, which is basically just mud that costs 5 times as much. It's fine, Toby, I said. Good news about the mortar. It's more authentic that way. Right. Authentic mud. The dream, Toby said, waving a gloved hand. See you tomorrow, Elias. Oh, and hey, don't let the gargoyles get you down. The ones on the rendering, I mean. They look a bit like my Aunt Mildred when she's judging my life choices. As Toby left, the weight of the situation settled on me. I didn't want to be doing this. I would have preferred a wife who loved me, a partner who wanted to build a life rather than a settlement. But you cannot build on sand. You cannot save a structure where the beams have been hollowed out by termites. The climax came at the Emerald Gala, a high society fundraiser for the local hospital. It was the social event of the season, and Elena had been preparing for it for months. She had a new dress, emerald green, of course, and a look of supreme confidence. Sloane and Bridget were there, flanking her like a Praetorian guard. They whispered in her ear, their eyes darting to me with predatory glee. Elias, Elena said, intercepting me near the bar. She had a glass of champagne in one hand and her phone in the other. We need to talk. Somewhere private. Now? The mayor is about to give his speech. Now, she insisted. We moved to a small balcony overlooking the manicure gardens. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and clipped boxwoods. I know what you're doing, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and triumph. I know about Project Phoenix. I know you're trying to hide the money, Elias. I have the photos. I have the proof. I looked at her, truly looked at her. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by a hollow vessel filled with Sloane's poison. Elena, you shouldn't have gone into my study, I said quietly. I had to protect myself. Sloane said you'd try to leave me with nothing. But I'm smart. I'm going to take the house, the rental properties, and half the firm. My lawyer is already preparing the filing. Unless what? Unless you sign the townhouse over to me tonight and a guaranteed monthly stipend of $20,000, irrevocable. We can stay married for the sake of appearances. But I want my independence. It was a classic shakedown. The intimacy she had offered over the last few months was the carrot. This was the stick. I can't do that, Elena, I said. Then I'll see you in court, and I'll show the judge how you've been funneling money away from your wife. Go ahead, I said. She blinked, confused by my lack of panic. I will. I'm leaving tomorrow. Sloane has a guest house ready for me. I know, I said. In fact, I've already had your things packed and sent there. They should be arriving shortly. Her face went pale. What? I filed for divorce this afternoon. Elena, I said, pulling a small envelope from my tuxedo jacket. And I filed a restraining order regarding our shared accounts. Because you were caught on camera accessing confidential firm documents. Project Phoenix. I've had to report a potential breach of corporate trade secrets. It's a messy legal gray area, but it allows me to freeze everything until a full audit is completed. You trapped me, she hissed. No, I said. I observed you. I watched you listen to a woman who has failed at 3 marriages and decide that her path was better than ours. Project Phoenix isn't a fund, Elena. It was a test, a structural stress test, and you failed it. The legal battle lasted 8 months. It was a masterclass in surgical precision. Elena's lawyer, a man who clearly charged by the hour and enjoyed the sound of his own voice, tried to paint me as a cold, calculating husband who had manipulated his wife into a trap. Julian, my attorney, simply sat there with a stack of papers and a bored expression. When Elena's side presented the Project Phoenix photos as evidence of financial fraud, Julian calmly presented the actual Project Phoenix documents, a series of theoretical exercises for a graduate-level architecture business course I had been invited to guest lecture. There was no money. There were no accounts. It was a ghost. Furthermore, Julian presented the security footage from my study, not just of Elena taking photos, but of the 3 hours prior where she had sat at my desk, drinking wine and talking on speakerphone with Sloane. The recording was clear. He's such a fool, Sloane. Elena's voice echoed in the courtroom. He thinks if he's intimate enough, I'll forget about the money. I just have to keep him happy for another month until he signs the deed. Then I'm done with him. Good girl, Sloane's voice replied. Make him crawl a little. Men like Elias think they're in control because they have the checkbook. Show him the checkbook is a two-way street. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a penchant for integrity, looked at Elena with a mixture of pity and disgust. The prenup held, because Elena had been caught on tape admitting to a transactional intent to defraud the marital estate. The good faith clause was invoked. She walked away with exactly what she had brought into the marriage, a modest savings account and her personal effects. No townhouse, no stipend, no half of the firm. A year later, the St. Jude's Library was finished. The amber glass caught the afternoon sun, casting a warm, golden glow across the reading room. The mahogany wainscoting was polished, the rot gone, the structure reinforced with steel hidden behind the beauty. Marcus was there, finally happy because the city had allowed him to plant 3 new oaks to replace the one he'd cut down. He was throwing a ball for his new golden retriever, a clumsy beast that was currently trying to eat a bronze plaque. Toby was hovering near the refreshment table, explaining the chemical composition of the heritage mortar to a group of bored-looking socialites. And the best part, Toby was saying, gesturing wildly with a tiny quiche, is that it breathes. If the building gets damp, the mortar just exhales the moisture. It's like the library is alive. I stood on the balcony, the same one where I'd first designed the reinforcements. The air was clear, free of the scent of lilies. I had lost a wife, but I had saved my life. I had learned that you cannot fix a person the way you fix a building. You can't replace a heart if the owner doesn't want it mended. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. I was an architect. I knew how to build things that lasted. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to start a new project. One with a foundation built on something stronger than silk and secrets. One built on the truth, however cold it might be. I watched Toby accidentally drop his quiche into a woman's handbag and began to laugh. It was a quiet, genuine sound, the sound of a man who was finally, truly home. Thank you for listening. That brings today's story to a close. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. See you next time.